Oh no! What happened to your squash plants? They look all wilted and dried out. The leaves are limp and curled up, and there doesn't seem to be any life left in those plants. In today's episode, we're digging into one of the most frustrating garden pests, the squash bug. Find out how to spot them early and how to fight back without using chemical sprays and save your squash. Let's dig in. Welcome back to Homegrown, your backyard garden podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Rogers from OakHillHomestead.com, where I help gardeners grow healthy food wherever they live. Today we're digging deep into the most frustrating garden pest, at least in my garden, the squash bug. We're going to focus on prevention and the many ways you can take action against squash bugs without using chemicals. Just a quick note before we go any further. Today's episode is all about squash bugs, not about squash vine borers. I know the symptoms can look really similar, and often both pests show up about the same time. Both can be devastating to your plants and need careful attention and a solid plan to deal with them. But in this episode, we're going to focus just on squash bugs, and I'll cover squash vine borers in the future. Squash bugs, Anassa tristes, are small, flat, gray insects about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch long. They literally suck the life out of your squash plants, including zucchini, summer squash, pumpkins, winter squash, and all the rest of them. Squash bugs have piercing mouth parts, so they don't chew leaves like other bugs or caterpillars. Instead, they suck the sap from plants and inject toxins that cause the rapid wilting known as, appropriately, squash bug wilt. This is especially tough on new gardeners who might wake up one morning to find a once thriving squash plant looking limp and wilted, or even dead. You might think that you didn't water your plants enough, even though the soil is still damp. What makes squash bugs even more frustrating is that they are hard to get rid of once they show up in numbers. The adults are tough. They are survivors. They lay their eggs in clusters on the underside of your squash leaves, which can be hard to spot unless you're really looking for them. In fact, by the time you notice the damage, squash bugs may have already laid hundreds of eggs. You'll find the squash bug eggs on the underside of squash leaves, small, shiny, and copper-colored, laid in clusters between the leaf's veins. The nymphs, or hatchlings, are small, gray or whitish-colored with black legs. They move very quickly and usually hang out in groups under the leaves. The nymphs go through several stages of growth, called instars, before they reach adulthood, and they are slurping and snacking on your plants the whole time. The adult squash bugs can be found on the base of the plants or under the leaves, especially in warm, dry weather. In warm climates, there may be 2 or more generations per season. In cooler areas, usually just one. Squash bug damage often looks like drought stress, not getting enough water. The plant's leaves wilt even if the soil is damp, but when you water, the plants don't perk up, and eventually the plant will die. In the early stages of infestation, you might also see yellowing or mottled spots on the leaves, and eventually brown or black edges on the leaves, but the most obvious and telltale sign is the bugs themselves or their egg clusters. Squash bugs usually appear in late spring or early summer when your squash plants really get going. These bugs love warm weather. The adult bugs go dormant over the winter and become active again in the late spring or early summer when the weather warms up, just as your squash plants begin to really take off. They emerge from hiding places where they have overwintered, mate, and lay eggs on the undersides of the leaves. If you don't catch them early, their population can explode fast. Squash bugs overwinter in garden debris, piles of leaves and branches, and sometimes under mulch. So prevention really begins in the fall, when you clean up your garden and put it to sleep for the winter. Dispose of garden debris, leaves, branches, dead plant matter, and so on. Disturbing the top layer of garden soil in the fall, and again in early spring, by tilling or raking the top several inches of soil, can also help to control adult bugs that may be hiding there. Another form of prevention is to rotate your crops, so you're not planting squash where it grew last year. You can help prevent squash bugs at least for a while by covering your seeds or small squash plants with row covers that prevent access to the plants. This protection really only lasts for a while, though, until the squash flowers appear. You need to remove the row covers so that pollinators can reach the flowers. Besides, squash plants quickly grow too big for row covers anyway. You can also choose to grow resistant varieties of squash. Some butternut and acorn squash types are considered less appealing to squash bugs. Zucchini has also been shown to be more tolerant than yellow squash. Not totally resistant, but more so than yellow summer squash. The varieties that squash bugs like best seem to be yellow crookneck squash, black zucchini, and especially Hubbard squash. Even though some varieties are more resistant, squash bugs can still be a problem. Good garden hygiene, removal of infested plants, and other pest control measures all contribute to your plan to win the war on squash bugs. Companion planting can also help. Planting the following in between and around your squash plants can be helpful, and as a bonus, many of them attract pollinators too. Garlic and onions can be planted around your squash plants to help deter squash bugs. Tansy, French marigolds, petunias, peppermint, spearmint, and catnip are all strong-scented plants that repel many insects, including squash bugs. Beware that mint and catnip, which is also a member of the mint family, are aggressive plants, and you might want to plant them in containers rather than in the ground, where they could take over your garden. Move the containers around in your garden as needed. Even radishes, when left to flower and go to seed, can deter squash bugs. Borage and dill attract beneficial insects, such as parasitic wasps, ground beetles, and taconid flies that prey on squash bugs. Nasturtiums are a good trap crop. The squash bugs like them even more than squash. Plant trap crops on the edge of your squash bed and keep an eye on them. When you find squash bugs on these plants, deal with them just as you would if they were on your squash plants. But the benefit is that the damage is done to these flowering plants instead of to your squash. If your trap crops are overrun with pests, you can remove and dispose of the plants. While companion planting can help deter squash bugs, it's not a guaranteed solution. A combination of companion planting and the other methods we've discussed, like fall cleanup, garden hygiene, daily inspection, and planting resistant varieties, may be necessary for effective squash bug control. This is my most important tip. In late spring, make it a habit to inspect your plants every couple of days. Be really thorough. Look under the leaves for copper-colored eggs that are laid in clusters between the leaf's veins. When you find some, you must remove them from the leaves, either by scraping them off, squashing them, or removing that portion of the leaf. If you scrape off the eggs, using your fingernail or the side of a spoon works well, don't just scrape them off onto the ground. Squish them, or dispose of them in a zippered sandwich baggie. Personally, I cut off the leaf, at least the portion with the eggs on it, and put that in a zippered bag for disposal. Some gardeners use the sticky side of duct tape to remove the eggs from the leaves, and then dispose of the tape in zippered bags. But once you find that first cluster of eggs, you will need to be diligent. Check every day for newly laid eggs and dispose of them. Yes, inspect your plants every day. Squash bugs and nymphs are more sluggish in the morning when the weather is cool, so this is an ideal time to check for them. The nymphs tend to hang out under the leaves, while the adults hide during the day around the base of the plant, under leaves, and even under mulch. Grab any adults that you spot so that they can't lay more eggs. Or knock them off the plant into a container of soapy water. Use 1 teaspoon of mild soap to a quart of water, or you can squash the bugs. I wear my gardening gloves. Grab them with my fingers and plunge them into that container of soapy water to drown. Along with these hands-on methods, you can try these organic treatments that offer an extra layer of protection against squash bugs. Sprinkle diatomaceous earth, commonly referred to as DE, around the base of your squash plants. It's a fine powder made from fossilized algae, and it works by drying out soft-bodied insects like squash bug nymphs. DE needs to be kept dry to be effective. You'll need to reapply it after it rains. Also, be careful not to breathe in the dust. Insecticidal soaps disrupt the cell membranes of soft-bodied insects like the nymphs, causing them to dehydrate and die. They are less effective on insects with hard exoskeletons, like adult squash bugs. Follow the directions on the label to apply these insecticidal soaps. Once the soap dries, it no longer has an insecticidal effect. It has to be reapplied as needed. You can also use a neem oil spray. Neem is a natural oil from a tree, and while it doesn't kill bugs on contact, it messes with their ability to feed and reproduce. Spray it in the early morning or evening when bees and pollinators are not active. Wood board traps are quite effective as well. Lay flat boards on the soil near your plants, where squash bugs can hide overnight. Give them a hiding place. Flip the boards over each morning while it's still cool and the bugs are sluggish, and dispose of the adult squash bugs underneath. If you have one, a handheld vacuum can be used to suck up bugs from the leaves and stems. That kind of sounds like fun. Squash bug eggs, nymphs, and the adults are preyed upon by various natural predators, including taconid flies, parasitic wasps, ground beetles, ladybugs, spiders, and some birds. So get to know these beneficial allies and welcome them to your garden. We covered a lot of ground this time, so let's review what we have learned about squash bugs, how to prevent them, and how to treat them if you find them on your squash plants. Start in the fall by cleaning up all garden debris and removing places that adult squash bugs can overwinter. Rake through the soil in the fall and again in the spring to disturb adult squash bugs that are overwintering. Rotate your squash crops so that you're not planting them in soil where squash grew last year. This is true even when growing in containers. Use row covers if desired to protect your young plants in the early spring. Plant resistant varieties and avoid those that are highly susceptible to squash bugs. Use companion planting to repel squash bugs and trap crops to attract them away from your plants. Use organic means to fight an infestation, such as insecticidal soap, DE, and neem oil. Lay flat boards around your plants overnight. Remove them in the morning and gather the adult squash bugs hiding underneath. Inspect your plants regularly and often, looking for damage and for egg clusters. Remove adult bugs by hand, drowning them in soapy water, and remove the leaves with egg clusters. I hope this episode has given you hope. Hope that you can grow squash successfully in spite of squash bugs. Grab your free printable with a list of companion plants for squash. It also lists the resistant varieties you can grow. This printable is a great addition to your garden binder or journal. You'll find the link in the show notes. Also, for images of squash bugs and their egg clusters, check out the transcript of this episode on my website, oakhillhomestead.com. Thank you for hanging out in the garden with me today. Hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening so you don't miss any future episodes, and share this episode with another gardener. And if this podcast has been helpful or encouraging, I'd be so grateful if you'd leave a quick rating and review. I'll see you here next time on Homegrown, your backyard garden podcast.